Welcome to Equine Assisted World. I'm your host, Rupert Isaacson, New York Times bestselling author of The Horse Boy, The Long Ride Home and The Healing Land. Before I jump in with today's guest, I just want to say a huge thank you to you, our audience, for helping to make this happen. I have a request. If you like what we do, please like, subscribe, tell a friend. It really helps us get this work done. As you might know from my books, I'm an autism dad. And over the last 20 years, we've developed several equine-assisted, neuroscience-backed certification programs. If you'd like to find out more about them, go to newtrailslearning.com. So without further ado, let's meet today's guest. Welcome back to Equine Assisted World. This is going to be a fun one. I've got Katja Mehlhorn here, who's German but lives in the Netherlands. And she lives in near the town of Groningen, Groningen, and she runs Horse Kids Groningen. But she's also an academic, a jolly clever brainiac, doctory type person. And she's a psychologist at the University of Groningen, dealing with AI, but not with the development of AI, but with teaching students how to actually research and not rely on AI, which is interesting that we have to pay attention to that. In the days she's not doing that, of course, she's on the farm and she's working with the equine assisted field in various ways with various populations out there in rather beautiful countryside in the northern Netherlands. So she's really got a very broad focus, and I'm very excited to talk to her. I've known Katja for a while and I've watched her develop her program, and I've always been kind of silently in awe, going, whoa, how do you do that? Whoa, how do you do that? So now we finally get a chance to ask the lady. So Katja, thank you for coming on the show. Can you tell us who you are and why you got into this equine assisted thing when you could so easily have just had a cushy number at the university and just ridden horses in your spare time?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm really honored. When Ileana asked, I thought like, wow, you have this amazing list of speakers, and then what do I have to add? But let's see.
You're an amazing speaker. But yeah, okay.
So asking me about horses, that's a long story. I always loved horses. And yeah, when you have to decide what kind of job to do, everyone said like, yeah, don't work in horses, become like something real. So after looking into being a vet or biologist, I ended up with psychology because I'm really interested in behavior, animal or human, whatever. So that seemed to be kind of a good fit. And then I kind of got drawn into a PhD and I started that. But yeah, research is cool, psychology is cool, but the horses always just had the stronger pull on me.
Horses are cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So while I was doing a postdoc actually in Pittsburgh in the US, I started volunteering at a center that did riding for the handicapped, so a PATH center. And I thought, wow, that's it. That's what I need to do. That's so amazing. So, yeah.
Why?
Why? Yeah, why? You are happy yourself if you're with the horses, at least if you're a crazy horse person like we are. But you also see the effect on those kids. They had kids there who were in a wheelchair. They seemed barely conscious, kind of the head hanging down, and they were being rolled in. And you thought like, pooh, okay, we're going to put you on a horse. And then they smiled. And the parents said like, wow, that's their smile of the week. And it just gives you goosebumps, see the effects that it has. Or, yeah, very excited autistic kids calming down on the horse, kids saying their first words. It's just, yeah. Magic is the best word I can think of.
Right. It's interesting. I'm always interested in this though, because I'm so terrible. I'm so selfish. Of course, I didn't get involved in this until there was a gun to my head, with my own son, and then luckily, fortunately for me, finding a way into his world through the horse. But I'm always rather intrigued by people who come to it from the outside and say, yeah, I want to do this vocationally, because it's not an easy thing to do at all. Also, now, what you do at Horse Kids Groningen is not like the standard path thing, right? So you started with that. So tell us how it differs and why does it differ? What have you developed and why have you developed in that direction?
Yeah, so when I did volunteered there at the Path Center, I became certified as a Path certified riding instructor. But they really have to focus much more on the physical handicaps.
Yeah.
And being a psychologist, I was obviously more interested in the mental part. And then also when I started having my own center, like if you have people with wheelchairs and things like that, you need a lot of infrastructure. While the mental stuff you can do much easier on a small scale by yourself or with a couple of volunteers. So that's the practical side. What I also really like is to be creative and funny and really zoom in on the individual kids' needs. And in the standard kind of path setting, you have a group that kind of more or less does the same activity. And yeah, it always felt like it was magic on the one hand, but it also felt like you could do more than what, at least what they did there. If you have the resources, because of course, if you do it individually, it takes more resources than if you help kids in a group.
Right. And as you say, the standard therapeutic model that evolved in the USA, UK, and actually Germany too,
Yeah.
you're from, really came about after World War II, where people basically missing limbs who'd been blown up were coming back home, often to family riding establishments because their father perhaps had been in the cavalry and had started a riding school when they retired. That was a standard thing to do. So you had these people who were already motivated to ride and perhaps already knew how to ride coming back from the war and then wanting to adapt, figure out some sort of adaptation. I guess in our world, when we're dealing particularly with autism as well, is one isn't always dealing with people who have the ability to follow top-down instruction and also who may or may not be motivated to ride at all. That's one of the things I often find really interesting about our work is that we're letting the horse facilitate a change in the brain, which could be riding, it could be something else, or it could not be the horse at all. Then we need to know how to do that without the horse. So I find that very exciting. But as you say, it takes a certain resource-rich environment because it does require, if not one-to-one, at least very small groups. And if you've got groups, you need a lot of instructors or facilitators or whatever we want to call ourselves. Let's just talk a bit now about you've got a rather special program there. Can you give us a snapshot of what you do?
Yeah, so we have the amazing luck to live on this beautiful old Dutch farm with a small herd of 7 horses, 4 of which I use. I hate the word use. I don't use horses. I
Indeed.
work with in the therapy setting. And I have kids here, mainly individual, who come for sessions of 1.5 hours. And then we work with them on their goals. And of course, you have to have like properly written down, at least in the Netherlands, it's paid for by the municipality. So you need the goals on the list and everything nice. But of course, then the kid comes in and maybe something totally different is going on that day.
Yes.
So it often feels like you kind of set a safe space where they can come in, they calm down, you do some jokes and some movement and some action, and then you kind of just, facilitate that things can happen. And that can be very like social, emotional goals, but it can also be math or whatever is at that moment important for that.
So yeah, you will go to the academic stuff as well if people. Yeah. So talk to us about someone coming in with difficulties with maths. How give us some ideas about how you approach this.
Yeah. So I have this autistic boy that's been coming for a couple of years. And we've worked on all kinds of things, but recently math is a thing because they have to, do math in school, and he decided he's bad at it. So nothing with numbers was like even allowed. But he loves Formula One. So as part of his lessons, always we do racing. So then he decides which race car the horse is, and then we race around, and then the horse becomes another race car. So at some point we added, does this race car also have a number? So just kind of throwing in numbers for fun without doing anything for it or with it. At some point we actually took the time it took. How do you call it? With stopwatch.
Oh yes, yeah, timed it.
Yeah, we timed it, and then we wrote on a whiteboard the times. And then he actually also wanted to write a time, and then he wrote a total bogus time, but it doesn't matter. He wrote a time, and he got really excited by, hey, that's numbers and that has something. So slowly, kind of, we drop the numbers in a way that are not scary. You don't have to do anything with them, which just kind of introduces in
Just start a relationship with them where the
yeah.
numbers are safe. Yeah.
We did a lot of step counting.
Mm.
Also, like the horse trots 10 steps, and then we kind of a rule-based game. The next person can decide how many steps, and then we have to take turns, and he has to like keep track of whose turn it is to say a number, and then.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about we have a version of the time it takes to do something where we'll walk the distance first. So let's say we'll walk it out in meters ourselves, just in steps, but we'll do it, in a silly walk style, or we'll do it as ostriches or as ducks or just anything to make it funny, or in a way that, as you say, now we're all Formula One drivers or something. And then we can calculate, of course, the distance over time and get speed. And it's really interesting. We've had so many kids who have this difficult problem with math. I was one of those kids, of course, who then fall into doing these types of experiments with numbers really easily, because as far as they're concerned, this is no longer a math lesson. This is just trying to find out how fast am I, let alone how fast are you. And I'm always astonished that when people are in school, numbers are not presented in this way. So many of us are made to feel unsafe around numbers because it often goes with sarcasm and scorn. And, when I was a boy, we even got beaten. So, you knew that a trip to the whiteboard to get it wrong in front of the whole class could also result in physical violence. So, naturally we became number averse. But there's so much shame around numbers. Tell me, okay, you make people feel safe with this. You yourself are a numbers girl because, you've come up through the science route. And I know you, so I know that you have a facility for numbers. And something that can be difficult, I find, for people who do have a talent for numbers is empathizing and putting themselves in the shoes of people who struggle with this, because it comes somewhat naturally to you. What was your process in getting over that so that you could actually empathize with someone that sees numbers very differently to the way you do?
I That's weird to say, do you have a talent? But I think I have a talent in that sense that I'm pretty good at, or at kind of getting at where someone is at. I'm pretty good at imagining how it is if you can't do things. There's enough things I've struggled with. So I don't remember that I went through that phase actually.
That's
So
interesting.
yeah,
What did you struggle with? Because
horse
I think
things.
of you as a super brain. So I'm like, what could Katja probably possibly struggle with academically?
Well, academically, well, actually, like higher math, definitely, I did struggle with.
Okay.
But I struggle a lot with like physical things, like horse riding, dancing,
Okay.
those things. I always feel like, oh, some people can do it so easy, and it takes me so much effort to.
What do you find? That's really interesting to me. What do you find is your biggest physical challenge? Because again, knowing you, I know you as a bit of an athlete. I mean, you're always running around. You're in great shape. We've worked
That,
together
yeah.
with horses. I haven't observed you having any particular difficulty. What do you see as your difficulty? Do you feel that's actually more something mental, or is there actually something physical?
Question. I think rhythm, like in high school, dancing class was hell because I just couldn't let myself be led. But I also couldn't lead myself. So, but also to like have tension in the right part of the body and relaxation in the right part, which you need for riding. Then like, oh no, your back moves at the wrong point, and I just can't like. How do people do it? I can't figure out how. Yeah.
Do you then okay, so do you struggle with this concept of tension and relaxation, relaxation and tension, like, being relaxed enough that you can move fluidly but having enough tension that you don't
Yeah, I seem to relax in the wrong body parts and keep tension in the wrong body. I don't know.
And then do you encounter, because your program is both ridden and on the ground,
Hmm.
right? So how do you help people when you see them encountering the same problems in the ridden as you might have? What's your go-to for helping them?
That's actually interesting because I had a discussion with a couple of my more advanced students, and they said, "Oh, but you were so great at explaining those things." And I thought, like, wait, really? But then I thought, yeah, I really had to go through all the steps myself to figure out exactly which muscle and in what way does it have to move,
Okay.
compared
So,
to a very talented rider who just says, "Sit straight and move with the horse." And I'm like, I don't know how to do that.
all right. So when you have to break it, can you give us an example of how you break this down for someone? I think a lot of people listening and watching will go, yeah, actually, I have that problem too. And I would imagine that a number of people that you think, Katya, are very good riders probably struggle with this more than they let on. So yeah, tell us how you broke it down.
Well, exercise I really like is the, I don't know, how are they called, the Russian dolls that are on,
Hmm.
yeah, kind of a balancing.
Oh, for us, the Russian dolls are the ones that you open and it's like
Yeah,
lots of,
no, they're the other ones that have like a heavy ass.
right. You can't push them over. They have
Yeah, okay.
a weight on the bottom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so put someone on the horse and say, okay, lean forward a bit till you feel that you would drop on your nose if I magic away the horse. And that's like great for kids and like, oh, you can do magic. So always add some fun and not make it too serious. Okay, now lean backward a bit until you feel you would land on your ass if I magic away the horse. And then kind of slowly swing and find the middle. Because then you know you're in balance compared to just sit straight or
Can
sit
you
in a.
do that with the horse first not moving?
Yes, definitely. And sometimes even on the ground first.
Okay. So let's say you start on the ground, then you go to a non-moving horse. How do you help them once the horse starts moving? Because that it brings in other variables, right? Like side to side, etc.
Yeah, yeah. So we also do it side to side indeed. And then
Okay.
first at the walk and I lead the horse around. And sometimes let them close their eyes. That really helps to feel also.
Then when it comes to, okay, so I could see exploring the boundaries. What's
Yeah.
the middle point? Closing your eyes for feel. This is very good. Also, starting not on the horse. I'm a great believer, as you know, in starting everything we're going to do with a pony, not with a pony, so
Yeah.
that we can have a muscle memory to bring to the pony. Only took me 500 years to work that one out. But okay, then once they're up there and you want to then develop them, how have you, let's start with you yourself. How did you develop yourself beyond that point? And then how do you show them how to do that?
Yeah, the what's always really useful too, I think, is practicing in like sitting trot or standing,
Mhm.
or for example, not just to, how do you call it, up down? No, you don't call it like,
Hosting or rising, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Hosting for the Americans, rising for the Brits, yeah.
yes. So, but then do it in another rhythm. So rise for two, sit for one, or
Okay.
rise for four, sit for four, rise for eight, sit for eight. You can directly make a game of that again with the kids who are number challenged.
That was going to be my question. If you combine numbers with balance like that, what's the result for the brain?
Well, hopefully you get learning
Because
because
that sounds to me like vestibular system activation, right?
yeah,
Yeah. And again, for those listeners who don't know what the vestibular system is, don't worry. It's those three little bones in your inner ear which act like a sort of spirit level to make sure you don't lose your balance. Apparently, when that gets activated, it puts our bodies on high alert because we obviously don't want to fall. So it seems to be connected with long-term learning. And it is very interesting to me, the two languages that I speak French. As you know, my German is by no means perfect, but it's functional. And both of those I learned on the back of a horse rather than in a classroom. And I would posit that it was because of the vestibular system
mm,
activation that vocabulary tends to stay in my head if it's given to me in that. And we have this really good teacher called Cade Lang who does movement method in Colorado, who does a lot of his math while making kids just balance along a curb of a street or a curb of the parking lot. And he says this also,
great. Yeah.
gets these things going. When these kids then, after playing these numbers games, go back to school, do you get any feedback from them, the
Yes,
parents or the teachers?
certainly. So I think the goal that I have is not to actually teach them the numbers, because I can't do that in 1.5 hours a week or even every 2 weeks, but to kind of get them unscared of the numbers, so
Yeah.
that they dare to do it in school again. And actually, that boy, at some point, the mom texted me very excitedly, he's doing sums by himself. He's just writing down sums and doing them. And now he's actually totally into multiplication tables. So every time he comes now, we have to teach the horse a new multiplication table. We're getting very smart horses this way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your horses must be, yeah, they're probably going to graduate from your program and go get jobs at the university
Yeah,
themselves.
they're literate for sure. Yeah.
These kinds of kids that you're talking about here with anxiety, learning difficulties, social, emotional, these, of course, are kids that can, for the most part, follow top-down instruction. Talk to us about how you approach somebody with more classic autism, particularly in the younger years where top-down instruction is really not a possibility. What's your way in there? How do you go?
Well, I have kids that are a little higher on the functioning level. I don't have any non-verbal, at least haven't had in a while. But even then, like the boy I'm talking about now, you cannot have a normal conversation, normal, whatever is normal, but like
Hmm.
we are having now, you couldn't have with him. So
Hmm.
it's a lot through game and to like me and the volunteers talking about something with him hearing it and then trying to involve him. And if he doesn't want to be involved, just hoping that he will soak it up in some way.
Yeah, would you say lead him through the game on the horse, perhaps without asking him at first
Yeah,
to
for sure.
understand with a
Yes,
capital U?
definitely. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, one of the things which, I know some people listening might say, well, how can that help? But of course, what we're talking about here is neuroplasticity, right? That remembering that all movement, particularly if the body has to solve problems like balance while the movement is going on, and that, of course, is going to happen on a horse, this causes the brain to produce that protein, BDNF, which creates neurons. So, yes, you're going to see progress because you're just creating more neurons. And I wish this were understood better at schools when we're doing, say, movement method in schools. One of the hardest things to get people to get their heads around is not separating movement from learning. Not
yeah.
saying, if you do this boring thing you don't want to do, I will
Then you can go
reward
out and
you.
play. Yeah.
Yeah. Just go and play,
Yeah.
have the conversation, and integrate that thing into the play. And that's why sport is so good. And the neuroplasticity will begin to happen, and that person will have a very different brain in 6 weeks to the brain that came through the door simply because of that neuroplasticity process. And this, I feel, isn't taught enough in the equine assisted world, really, that what is our goal here, And for me, the goal, I guess, as an autism dad is always neuroplasticity, but it
Hmm.
has to be surely also for mental, emotional stuff, right? Because you don't want to be in a static state,
Yeah.
right? You want to develop on. You understand this neuroplasticity thing well. Can you give us a bunch of examples? I think it'd be really useful for people to have practical examples of a number of things that you would do at Horse Kids Groningen, specifically kind of aimed at this neuroplasticity.
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes in all the time. One of the important things I think that you can't underestimate importance is safety, that you feel safe, because the brain can't learn if it doesn't feel safe, because then it's just in the wrong kind of state.
Mm,
And movement, which is fun. It activates the brain, but it also again helps to feel safe, unless you run away or fight, I guess. So yeah. So I think it's a bit part of everything. But I was just like triggered by something you said, like you let them go through the game without asking them to understand it. And I think that's
at
really,
first, yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's really important, that you don't put pressure on there or ask their attention, because then again there's this danger, someone's asking something from me, and then the learning is not happening.
Exactly. I find this even with myself. Like, if you want me to understand something new, you have to give me a bit of time to just get used to it. Get used to the fact that it's happening around me. So if I take that to someone with, massive anxiety, or I take that to somebody with autism and the anxiety that goes with autism and feeling confused in the world, then this thing of asking for feedback, asking for eye contact, asking for attention, constantly wanting them to say or do something ends up being interpreted by the brain as a threat. And as we know, that makes the brain tell the body to produce cortisol, which actually kills brain cells. But it's so natural, of course, in a human to want to get that feedback. How do you discipline yourself? It took me a while to discipline myself. How do you discipline yourself to not ask for that feedback, to wait for that feedback to come?
Usually you get punished because I mean, I still do it all the time, but then
Yeah,
you see the
I
eyes
mess up
glaze
too.
over and you're like, oh, damn, yeah, that was, I shouldn't have asked. But then you make a joke of it, or,
Yeah.
yeah, it's,
It's an interesting skill, though. How long do you think it's taken you to acquire that skill of having that light approach where you're not asking for feedback so much?
yeah, I don't know. I'm still learning. I don't know.
Mm.
I got licensed as path instructor in 2012. So,
Mm.
and yeah, hopefully we are getting better every day. I don't think you're ever done with learning that. And then you have another kid and you might need to do it more or less. I think the the thing you really need to do is listen to the kid and, as you always say, follow the kid and see what happens. I mean, you just try something and
So how
sometimes
do
it
we listen to a
works,
kid
but
who's not?
sometimes it doesn't. Yeah.
How do we listen to a kid who's either not talking nonverbal or not wanting to express themselves? Talk to us about that kind of listening.
Yeah, well, it's great we have the horses because they listen for us. So often you can see in the reactions of the horse if there's tension in the kid, if you
Mm.
can't see it yourself.
Mm.
So there's all kind of signals horses kind of give. They're called calming signals. There's a Dutch person, Rachel Trijsma.
No, talk to me about this person.
She did actually great research
Hmm.
on hours and hours of videos where she watched horses and determined signals that more horses do that show that they are either so that they're basically changing between sympathetic and parasympathetic states, so between stress and relaxation. And those are the signals that we also know, for example, in the Masterson method, they also know a lot of those. So the blink of the eye or chewing or licking, lowering your head, the also more stress signals like the eyes getting very big or horses kind of fumbling on their body to kind of get the tension out. But yeah, those signals, if you the more you to learn to read your horses, the more you kind of see from the horse's reaction also on what's happening with the client.
Give us the name of this lady,
Yeah.
Rachel
Reisma.
Reisma. How do I
P
spell that?
R double AISMA, I think.
Raisma. I'm going to go look her
Yeah.
up, Rachel Reisma. Well, yeah, because this is an interesting thing with the equine assisted world is that it it's such a diverse world, right? From the path approach where they're sort of leading kids around through activities to horse boy where we're
Yes.
looking for neuroplasticity with a child in front of us in the saddle and oxytocin to, the Igala or other types of, on the ground models. They're all very much based on needing the horse to guide us,
Mhm.
or we kind of can't do the thing. And so I'm often quite surprised when one sees, for example, grumpy horses in a program or horses that are quite obviously not doing well physically, that this isn't addressed more. So that kind of, because I think what you're talking about, whether it's looking at this Rachel Reismer lady's work or say Masterson's work, which is also really good, that's more about learning how to interpret and help our horse. Of course, by the time we are working with a vulnerable human with a horse, we can't really do that well unless the horse is at a state of well-being that,
Hmm.
it can then transfer that well-being right, to that person. So when we're looking for those signals from a horse in a session, we're hoping that the baseline of the horse is now one of well-being.
Yeah.
So you've got your herd of 7. Talk us through this. How do you ensure your horse's well-being? I'm
Fun.
really because everyone's got their own approaches for this, and
Yeah.
it's it should be obviously the main conversation because these
Yes.
are our biggest colleagues, right?
Yes,
Um,
and I think that, yeah, you can't underestimate how important that is, because I mean, yes, I have to fight for the kids who come to me, but they have also other people who fight for them. My horses, I'm the only advocate they have, so I have to make
and
sure.
right, and the horses can't do it
Yeah.
unless you are advocating for them.
Yeah.
So yeah, so talk us through your sort of general horse
Yeah,
wellness.
so they live in a herd outside, but we also have the luck to have an indoor arena, at least an old shed that's an indoor arena, and that's their walk-in shelter as well.
Okay.
Unless we actually use it for riding, but then we can even split it in a way that they still have part of it for themselves. Yeah, they go out in the field on the grass, but it's Dutch, very rich McDonald's grass. So unfortunately, we can't do that 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
We have a big hay feeder, which is automated. So they
Okay.
get regular times feeding without long breaks. But they also don't eat too much because, yeah, what's in there is the McDonald's grass hay, of course. So that's kind of to make, I think the 3F, right? Feed, friends, and forage. That's kind of that's what we have in any case.
Indeed. I always feel one has to add another F in there, which is fitness.
Hmm.
And I don't often see this addressed enough. I was lucky because I grew up in that eventing, fox hunting world in the UK where fitness is kind of drummed into you and soundness, meaning long, slow trail rides, basically, to make sure the horse's tendons are fit and all of that. But I didn't realize also the emotional importance of that in horses until I started going to places that didn't do it. First in the sport world, in the jumping world in America, where I encountered some of my first really unhappy horses. And I was like, ooh, they just don't do this fitness work. And I know with myself, if I don't walk, I go funny in the head. So, but it's very difficult in a program when one has, clients coming in all the time. How does one find this time for the fitness work? Or how does one integrate perhaps better the fitness work into the sessions? Talk to us about that, because I know you actually do keep your horses pretty fit. How do you manage this?
Yeah, yeah. So part of it is, of course, that they can actually move on the track system they live on. We measured, and they move about like 10 to 14 kilometers a day just by
Okay.
themselves. But yeah, of course, that's not enough, and especially the fat ponies who like to move less. So indeed, I try to sneakily in the lessons and in the sessions always include something that we're working on with the horse. So maybe walking poles. I don't know, if we work on canter, then the kids are going to canter that week. We also do a lot of on mental fitness. So we do a lot of clicker training, trick training, agility things. So we have a,
Hmm.
what's it called, teeter totter?
Yeah, like a seesaw, a
Seesaw,
balance.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then a block they can go on. And recently I've started to do the stuff that you are teaching us with the classical dressage more than I used to.
Yeah. And
Because
for any listeners who hold up a crucifix at the dreaded D word, dressage, of course, for many people being synonymous with the devil, we're not so much talking about ridden dressage here. We're talking about in-hand work and long reining work. Doesn't mean you can't do the ridden work, but without that in-hand component and the long reining component, the ridden work can be detrimental. Whereas I was just before this podcast, I was just in the ram pen with one of my older horses, and we're just going through the in-hand patterns gently. And it's such a yoga, and I'm like, oh yeah, upward dog is pattern 1, shoulder in, and downward dog is counter shoulders in. And yeah, when one thinks about it in those terms, of course, it makes perfect sense. And if one approaches it in that way, it makes sense for a horse. But if one approaches it in a kind of performance-based way, well, then the stresses are obvious. So as you've been exploring this classical stuff, can you talk to us about how you do it and what effects have you seen with your horses?
Yeah, so I must admit it was kind of a difficult path for me because I'm like the long reins in the forest rider, like just have fun with the horses, and
Yeah.
this whole dressage stuff, it's too difficult. I can't do it anyway with my challenged body. That was kind of my idea. But it has really helped. So especially by starting next to the horse, it really helps that the horse can figures out the movements without you challenged human on there. And that really has helped to improve the riding. So actually, just last week, I was at a course that I've been on and off for a couple of years.
Mm.
And we worked on the canter, and they were like, wow, that goes well. Like, what did you do to work on the canter, like, since last time? Like, actually, I didn't at all. It's just all this in-hand stuff I've been doing, and magically the canter got better. So
What do you see emotionally and mentally in the horses with the in-hand work?
because I know that you always say that there's horses that don't like want to work with you, and then through the in-hand work they get softer and easier. I think I'm pretty lucky in that my horses already wanted to work. So in that sense, I don't see too much. Although the one I'm working most with the in-hand work right now is my paint quarter horse, who's
Hmm.
kind of stuck in his ways. Like he's like, okay, I
Hmm.
can do those tricks, and that's what I'm doing.
Hmm.
So
Don't change
then
my
you,
job description. Yes.
yeah, you ask something new, he's like, what? No, and then he
Contacts the
goes and
horse
shut
lady.
down ideally. So he's getting more like, oh yeah, you're doing the counting things, and okay, I'm on. So yeah, it has helped.
It'll be interesting to see how that horse develops because,
Mm.
as you know, we were in Texas for a long time and we had a lot of quarter horses, and quarter horses are great in one way, in which is that, as you say, if you show them a job and they get really familiar with that job, then they'll own that job, and it really almost doesn't matter who you put on them,
Mhm.
unless it's like a really hot barrel racing horse or something. But yeah, there's something in the genetic that when you change the job description, which of course one has to from time to time, you can often get this kind of weird overreaction, almost like hysterical. What? I can't believe you're asking me to move an extra 2 millimeters, And you're like, dude, it's only 2 millimeters. And then, of course, when they get used to that, then they're like, well, I've always been doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, like, well, then why were you make such a fuss the other day? Well, I didn't do that. For me, the in-hand work was a real game changer that way, that we saw these massive changes. And as you know, you're lucky, as you say, because you've got a pretty long-term integrated herd there. We do now ourselves as well. But in the old days, we had a lot of donation horses coming through, and also donation horses that we had to then rehab and put in other programs. And we found, yeah, I think it goes back to this BDNF neuroplasticity protein in the brain thing. I can't prove this, but it seems that because, as you know, in these patterns that you do with the in-hand work, go and you go, you get the horse across its midline all the time with its legs. And we do know from humans, like in martial arts and yoga, and dance, if we cross our midlines a lot, we get more neuroplasticity. It really does seem to change the personality of the horse and make it just way more of a flexible thinker. And I think we've seen this now so many times that even though I can't prove this scientifically, just from observation, we see it. But what we've also seen, and this is kind of what I want to talk about maybe next, is that when we get people to do this with the horses, we get a similar flexibility in the brain. I
Mhm.
mean, but I think you just put yourself there as an example. When I first met you, you were a little bit rigid about what you considered acceptable and what you considered not acceptable to do with horses and so on. And over the course of time that I've known you, you've become more and more flexible. And so are you now pairing up your staff, your clients with this kind of in-hand work and with the horses? And if so, what are you observing with them?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, and it's something like I'm doing that now, but even before that, I tried. as much as possible to have the clients help with the horses.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that helps me. That's great. But it's so great for their self-confidence. Like, oh, I can help you. You got a new horse and you ask me to help with it. I'm the first one who can trot on him. I mean, if it's true or not, whatever. But to give them the feeling like, wow, I'm not just here for myself, but also to contribute something. For example, or aside from the self-confidence thing, something just that they are able to do something for the horse can be so impactful for people. I have someone with very bad childhood trauma, and I let her do the Masterson, like the simple Masterson technique. It's the bladder meridian. You just slowly move your hand over a line on the body, and you look at the signals of the horse. And when you see things like a blink, you wait, and then at some point the horse, you get this big chewing, yawning, amazing action. And she was just moved to tears, like, wow, am I doing this to the horse? Can I actually make the horse feel better? Because she didn't think she could be useful for anyone. So that can be so impactful. And that's the same with having them help to train the horse, of course, in those patterns, and helping them train the horse get stronger.
Yeah, I think there's a particular crossover there with trauma, as you say. You know, there's a number of programs that we work with veterans, and we found that getting them to do the in-hand work, that's the Takin program, seems to have this direct correlation of, particularly when it's a new horse that needs rehab, because as you know, people who donate horses are not donating their best horse. So usually they're donating it for a reason. It's got some problem or problems and needs rehab. And if the underlying script is, this horse was broken in service, could you please help me bring this horse back so that it can now serve that autistic child over there? There seems to be such a value in that we didn't see initially, we couldn't have anticipated initially. Because as you know, when we started doing it, we did it out of desperation because we were running out of time to condition our own horses. And then I had this kind of moment where I was like, but hold on, Rupert, the clients are the horse trainers, surely, you know, and indeed that turned out to be the case. Okay, so
can I jump in on that?
please,
because I'm just thinking
do.
of an amazing place I've visited, and I also helped to do some research on, where they are horse rescue, and they also at some point just started having kids come in, and now they are also child rescue. So they work with at-risk youth, and they just do amazing things. And one of the ingredients is that they pair the child with a rescue horse, and then the child's kind of task is to rehab that horse.
That makes so much sense. Tell me, what's the name of this place?
It's Brook Hill Farm.
Brook Hill?
Yeah, in Virginia, I think. Joanne Miller is the director.
Virginia.
Amazing. Yeah, you should talk to her.
I absolutely am going to talk to her. What's the name of the person?
Joanne Miller.
Joanne, one word, or okay, Joanne Miller. I'll look her up. And that's horse rescue, horse and kid rescue. Yeah. I can feel another podcast coming on. There we go. Thank you very much. I will be in contact with her.
They have.
Why did you go there and do research? What took you there?
Oh, well, I met her I went to the PATH conference years and years ago, and I met her there, and we stayed in contact. And then when we really lived in the US, before moving back to Europe, we did a 6-week tour of the whole States. And then we stayed with her a couple of days. And we talked about, okay, how can you, because you're doing such amazing stuff, how can you actually show that in a way that others take serious? And then we started setting up this research paper, which I think got published finally last year. It took us like 10 years or so.
If you're in the equine assisted field, or if you're considering a career in the equine assisted field, you might want to consider taking one of our 3 neuroscience-backed equine assisted programs. Horseboy Method, now established for 20 years, is the original equine assisted program specifically designed for autism, mentored by and developed in conjunction with Dr. Temple Grandin and many other neuroscientists. We work in the saddle with younger children helping them create oxytocin in their bodies and neuroplasticity in the brain. It works incredibly well. It's now in about 40 countries. Check it out. If you're working without horses, you might want to look at movement method, which gets a very, very similar effect, but can also be applied in schools, in homes. If you're working with families, you can give them really tangible exercises to do at home that will create neuroplasticity when they're not with you. Finally, we have taquine equine integration. If you know anything about our programs, you know that we need a really high standard of horsemanship in order to create the oxytocin in the body of the person that we're working with, child or adult. So this means we need to train a horse in collection, but this also has a really beneficial effect on the horse's well-being. And it also ends your time conflict where you're wondering, oh my gosh, how am I going to condition my horses and maintain them and give them what they need, as well as serving my clients. Taquine equine integration, aimed at a more adult client base, absolutely gives you this.
What were the findings and where did you publish it?
At the Hattie Journal.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we could find it there.
Yes. Yeah.
Published by you, Katja Mehlhorn.
Yeah, I'm one of the authors. Yeah.
Okay. So what were the findings?
Yes. So, well, the findings was that all kids who started the program actually completed high school, which was very unlikely for that population because they all started because they were at risk of dropping out of high school.
So how long were they usually in the program for?
And depended on how far it was to high school graduation. So some started like 2 years before. I don't remember the exact numbers.
Right, but we're not talking like a period of weeks here. We're
No.
talking...
It is really long term. That's
Okay.
also so. In the paper, we discuss a couple of factors that could play a role, and the pairing with the rescue horse was one, but also that it's really a long term relationship.
Yes,
there.
but as you know, I mean, a lot of that seems to be a lot of the success behind all animal assisted therapies is that people will tend to finish the course of therapy because they now have a relationship with the animal,
Yes.
rather than a relationship with a boring old therapist who sits there in a chair making them feel terrible about themselves. Yeah. Okay, so they would tend to go on and finish high school. What were...
No, they're not 10 to all of them finished high school.
All of them?
Yeah, all of them. Yeah.
What was the control group? How many people were there?
Yeah, so it wasn't actually good research in that sense. So we just looked at what they did.
Yeah.
Because
how many people in the group?
What was the size of the group? I think they were 100 or something like that.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, that's sizable.
Yeah.
Were there other factors like criminal behaviors or violent behaviors or anything like that? Social, emotional stuff?
We didn't have numbers on that, but from like what they reported, definitely that got better because they did not get kicked out of school and they could finish school. A lot of them also came from pretty bad backgrounds.
Yes.
And despite that, they persevered. And I think almost all of them went on to like post-high school education. Yeah.
Do you know how
Cool stuff.
Joanne Miller gets this funded? Because, unlike in the Netherlands where you've actually got government funding for this, and I know this from having worked so many years in the USA, it tends to be philanthropy. This is quite a big program by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I think by now they actually got that far that they get paid by the school system.
Okay.
Yeah. So that took, of course, years of donating and fundraising and everything. And also because they're horse rescue, they get some funding through that. But by now at least last time I talked to her, the school district actually paid because they know, okay, these kids, if they go there, they will finish school. So.
Okay. Well, Brookhill Farm, I'm gonna look them up. One of the things which, as you know, with our methods, horseboy method, movement method, we actually ascribe the most importance to is the environment. We've definitely found that bringing a horse in, if the physical environment is full of bad sensory triggers for the human, and if the emotional environment is not good as well, if people are bossy, if people are, walking around with that body language that a lot of horsey people have, that I have to watch in myself too, when I was always kind of in a bit of a hurry with the body slanted forward and, barking orders at people. You've got a particularly whimsical environment, I feel. Can you talk us through your environment?
Whimsical.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite words because it's one of my favorite things.
How do you find whimsical?
Whimsical is a mixture of beautiful with slightly some elements of the fantastical and some elements of playful, joyful, where you're doing something for the pure pleasure of it.
Nice.
Rather than just for the usefulness of it. Yeah. Yeah. And usually there's some sort of natural implication in there. But yeah, talk us through your environment, because I felt when I was there was a lot to learn actually from just how your place is set up.
Yeah. I think nature, that's totally essential. And we live in the north of the Netherlands, in the countryside. So you would think nature is a thing, but no. Because the countryside here is basically just very flat, high energy grass for the cows that have to produce, I don't know how many liters of milk. So yeah, you have to put some work here to actually get more than just flat grass with 0 flowers. So we have some hills, we have trees. We are lucky that this place actually had still old trees. So part of where the horses are, that's also just trees. Yeah, we have flowers in the field. So what we do with the horses, with the kids a lot, we ride in the field with all the hills, and we go on a safari, and then we spot hyenas and tigers, and which are of course just the sheep and the cows of the neighbors. But it's good for your imagination to do some pretend play on the safari.
Talk to us about the flowers. How do you use flowers?
Yeah, so we have just herbs. And yeah, how do we use them? I mean, you look at them sometimes. Sometimes we go and collect edible plants for the horses. Perfect. Or even for the kids. Although I got a bit more careful, because I had this kid who really liked, or they called daisies.
Yeah. The white ones with the yellow center.
Yeah. And apparently he threw up when they got home. And his mom thought it was because of the daisies, which I kind of doubt, but
unlikely, because they're known as one of the most edible flowers.
Yeah, and I mean, he didn't eat kilos of them, but so I'm always a little like, okay, we try, but we don't eat too much.
Yeah, doesn't sound like it was the daisies. Yeah, because daisies are dianthus, and dianthus is.
And I think it just shows how scared people are of nature right now. Like, oh my God, you let my kid eat stuff from your garden. That must be why he got sick. So yeah.
Yes, unlikely. And I mean, kids get sick anyway. Doesn't mean one shouldn't be careful, but yeah, knowing one's environment. We do, as you know, tons of foraging, because that's actually how Horseboy started. Was I went without horses. Before there was Horseboy, I had gone for mentorship to Dr. Temple Grandin, who said, "Follow your child." So I followed him into the woods, and he just started eating stuff. And now, I have this background with hunting and gathering tribes, so I'm a reasonable forager, but I didn't know that particular environment in Central Texas. But it wasn't difficult to quickly learn like the 10 most common, edible plants. But there were actually a lot of poisonous plants in Texas that one had, and I couldn't explain to him the difference between edibility at that point and toxicity. So I would say, let's go look for daddy leaves. These are daddy leaves. These ones. These are not daddy leaves, and I'd mime like falling over and throwing up and dying. And he found that very funny. But to this day, he can feed himself off the forest. It's really interesting. And I always feel that that's such a good skill to teach people, because it's actually security. A couple of times in my life, in my younger life, I ended up completely broke and could to some degree feed myself off the countryside, while living in a tent.
It seems to be kind of an inherent human thing. Like we have, you probably saw our huge raspberry thing.
Yes.
So the kids just, like, sometimes they never pick their own fruit, and they're also fascinated by, wow, we can just like pick this and eat it, and it's nice. And
Well, because that's what it means to fundamentally be
yeah,
a human organism.
yeah,
We're not supposed to go to stores and buy
yeah,
food in plastic packages. We are supposed to feed ourselves from the habitat that our monkey species is
yeah,
supposed to live in. Yeah, I so agree that even the movements I feel of reaching to pick those types of fine motor, people spend ages trying to teach a child fine motor skills
yeah,
in a way that's not terribly motivating in a lab full of plastic stuff, when you can, as you say, go to your raspberry patch and you've got that gorgeous raspberry patch there and other berries, and the natural instincts are going to kick in and the fine motor skills will follow. It's always astonishing to me that people don't explore these things more as the standard therapeutic tools. Also, just the distance of walking, because I know that when the kids come to you, they're not always on the pony. They can run around, they can explore. So this is going to create endorphins, which is going to calm the brain, which is going to make the brain, open for learning. I know too that you've got an interesting bird reserve in part of your.
yeah.
Talk to us about that. I found that really interesting when I came to you.
Yeah, so the Netherlands used to be this big, what are they called in English? Like birds of the field or something?
Yes, and sort of a bird migratory
Yes,
way
yeah,
thing. Yeah.
But because of the fields looking now, like I just described earlier, with like high performance grass and zero flowers, which means zero insects, those birds are declining like crazy. And so they have set up systems that you can get actually government funding if you have an area that's bird friendly. And the most bird friendly is also water on the land. So we have a part where our land is just underwater. And then, it's amazing. It's just, I think that area is like 3 hectares, whatever that is in acres. I never know.
That's big. That's about 15 acres. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, that's nothing like compared to all the fields around us, which are just like that green golf course kind of stuff. And still the birds find it. And we have this, swarms of birds coming there and breeding there.
Do you take the kids, out to look at that? Do you educate them about the different bird species and how the ecosystem?
Yeah. So if we go for rides either on our safaris from the hills, you have a really, really great view on the bird area. But we also have this bike path going along our property. And normally those birds are really hard to see because they are kind of shy of people. But because they're used to being next to the bike path at our place, you can just like be on the bike path and like on the fence post 2 meters from you, there's this rare bird sitting.
Can you give us? I'm a bit of a bird nerd. Can you? And I'm sure some of the people are. Can you give us an example of what some of the species are?
Yeah, but not in English.
Let's try, and then we'll see if we can.
The gutto is the most.
Can you do a quick Google Translate on that one?
Yeah, I'll look. I think that's the Dutch national bird or something. Oh, godwit.
Godwits. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you don't know what a godwit is, lads, it's a really beautiful bird, shorebird with a long beak, and it's a black and white bird with quite long legs. Very, very beautiful. I know what a godwit is. What else have you got?
Kiewit, which is
Kiewit.
a lapwing.
Lapwings.
Sort of thing?
Yeah, when I was a boy in the East Midlands in England, we used to have clouds of lapwings. Which are
they're my favorite. They're so pretty with the little white grounds.
And they're like a plover with a little curlicue cresty thing on the back of the head.
Yeah.
Very elegant. And there was a point where I remember all the lapwings just kind of disappeared. And now they're like on the endangered list. But my boyhood, I remembered, clouds of thousands of them. And it's so interesting how this kind of thing happens in our lifetimes.
Shocking also.
If you're a horse nerd, and if you're on this podcast, I'm guessing you are, then you've probably also always wondered a little bit about the old master's system of dressage training. If you go and check out our Helios Harmony program, we outline there step by step exactly how to train your horse from the ground to become the dressage horse of your dreams in a way that absolutely serves the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of the horse and the rider. Intrigued? Like to know more? Go to our website, heliosharmony.com. Check out the free introduction course. Take it from there.
What sort of education do you give to the kids around these birds? Because that's a real metaphor for, obviously, the care for the planet, How's that integrated?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I should do that more. So usually they're like, oh yeah, birds. And then they want to move back to something interesting. So that most kids don't seem to, sometimes some are interested, but most don't really seem to care about the birds. But I should do that. And I mean, obviously you can also do geography and whatever, like looking up where they come from and
They travel and
yeah.
I mean, I guess so much of it depends on one's own level of enthusiasm. I tend to get the kids quite enthused about birds and wildlife because I get so enthused. So when people see me jumping up and down, then, okay, well, that's something to jump up and down about. But I remember when we were working, in Germany a lot, we would have these incredible flights of cranes coming over, fall in the spring, but really like thousands of them. And you'd hear them and then you'd look for them and then you'd see these crazy formations, but sometimes they'd also come over really low, and all of the kids got really excited. And as you say, then that became a way into talking about all the little brown birds that were around and starting to observe in more detail. And I was really often impressed by how often, if you just gave a child permission to be interested in something, because I think a lot of kids dismiss the natural world because their parental culture does. Like, bugs are disgusting, dirt is disgusting, that's awful, da 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 da. And I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed this, but frequently when kids come into our program, they come with that language. And then when they see you pick up a beetle or let a spider run over your hand and talk about how cool it is, and we really get down and look at it. And then the next thing I know, they're pointing out the things to me. And the next thing you know, they're delighted by it and exploring, and it's like they've rediscovered their habitat. Have you seen similar types of exercise?
Yeah, certainly. Like for example, we have apple trees, and then they pick up an apple and they drop it like it's hot. Like, wow, what's happening? Oh, there was like a little spot of dirt or an ant on there. And like, oh, but look, we just clean it off and you can still eat it. And then sometimes there's like no way they're even gonna go near that apple again. But sometimes they're like, oh, actually, it's nice. Or we feed it to the horse, and then at least the horse can enjoy it. So yeah, you can certainly lower their threshold for what they find disgusting. I don't know if that's something you found, but I find a lot of the autistic kids who come here also have a sensory thing with touching things that might be dirty.
Yeah.
Just touching the horse or touching a brush can be a challenge.
Absolutely. We found a really interesting way with that one, which was having first kids wear gloves to touch things so that they felt safe. And then we next to them would be touching the same thing without the glove and including it in the conversation, but without any pressure on the kid to remove the glove. But what I've found is that in general, after a few weeks of that, the kid starts doing it without the glove. And there was one really extreme example. As you say, we had this really dirt phobic kid. And one of the things which we did a lot in this particular place was mushroom foraging in the fall. And it's great because you take the kids out. And in Germany, it's really a thing, as you know. And we'd have the kid on top as a spotter. And we'd have a group of us around, have to spot mushrooms. And then we'd run off to see if they were one that we could pick or not. And if it wasn't one that we could pick, we'd also talk about why. But in general, we could fill up a bag. And we wouldn't ask them to eat that mushroom. We would do them for ourselves, but we'd be very grateful to the child, for helping us. But of course, in the process, they end up noticing all sorts of other things. But this one kid then kept saying, "How can you pick these mushrooms? They're full of bugs." Because they would observe, we'd pick it, and there'd be like stuff crawling on it.
Yeah.
And then I said, "Well, I used to be afraid like you, even though I didn't." And I found that if I did it with gloves, it wasn't a problem. By then, of course, the kid that we were some weeks in was interested, and at a certain point, he wanted to get off the horse with gloves on and pick the mushroom. And then, of course, he had a reaction when a bug crawled across the glove. But I think I noticed it was after about 10 weeks he was picking these mushrooms without the glove, and I had forgotten, and then I remembered, and then 2 weeks after that he was helping me plant trees and
Awesome.
getting his hands like in the dirt and removing all the things of dirt with his, and you realize, oh right, there's kind of a learning curve here. I guess is that neuroplasticity piece, right? That the brain actually changes, but it's going to change more rapidly and more effectively with the aid of the natural habitat our organism is supposed to be in, right? Whereas if one is always working in, say, an arena, that's such a sterile environment. How can we?
Well, actually, I've done the same thing with poo in an arena. A kid that was just like, "Oh, this is so disgusting," and I went poo picking, and I had him spot the poo for me. So yeah, even in an arena, you have to be creative with what you have.
And then you ended up showering in the poo and
No.
canoeing and swimming in the poo. Yeah, well, poo, of course, is really interesting because it's a barometer of health. So I always point out the poo and say, like, look at that poo. Do you think that that's from a healthy animal or a non-healthy animal? And if it's, and what I find is quite interesting is the kids actually instinctively often know. We all do. Like if it's runny or something, or if it's good, firm British stools, such as we built the empire with. It's really interesting how simply drawing attention to something like this, and then of course from there you can get into gut health, and from gut health you can get into brain health, and then you can get into diet, because as you know, a lot of these kids maybe don't have such great diets. It always seems to be that everything is a portal to something else.
Yeah.
You've also got a lot of water around you. You're in the Netherlands, and I know that you've got this beautiful, canal that runs by your old farmhouse through the fields. Have you been able to use that at all?
No, actually not. So I remember when you were there, you're like, "Oh, you should put like boats and stuff." But here it's just so normal. Like, yeah, of course there's water that no one even seems to care about the water. But that's still on my bucket list to do something more active with the water. I mean, what we do with the horses, we like if there's puddles or stuff, we go through. Or with some kids, sometimes also you have kids with some motor issues that find it hard to walk, for example. And then just walking through the mud together, and first you hold their hands. And I actually had a girl that was so afraid of walking through the mud a couple of years, and a while ago she walked with the pony. She got the pony out of the mud, and I was like, "Look at you, you're doing this all by yourself. Do you remember that you couldn't do it?" And she was like, "Really? No, I always could do this." So
That's so interesting, isn't it? The amnesia that kicks in once the skill set and the brain has made that change.
yeah.
Okay, that's my challenge for you then, is to use the water, because when I look at those things, and I've actually done a little bit of exploration here and there in the Netherlands on the waterways, and it's such a radically different perspective,
It is.
the landscape from the point of view of the water. And as you know, there's a lot of hidden wildlife that you only see if you're on the water. That some of the water birds, some of the water mammals, that sort of thing, they hide in those reed beds. So when I come back, I think we should.
You want to go on the water?
I want to go on the water, yeah. And I was thinking there's two ways to do it. Like you could do like a wide, flat-bottomed barge thing where there's room to move around, or one could do like canoes or double kayaks, or maybe depending on the cognitive level of the child. But I could see it being rather delightful, whimsical. There's that word, to sort of go to that dock by your house and then maybe canoe up to a point to then moor the boat to then catch the horse that's in that field and bring it back.
Switch at the windmill. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and you've got, that's right, you've got that windmill. So talk to us about that. It's a real old historical proper job,
pumping the
Windmill
water
and
kind of mill.
fairy
Yeah,
stories type thing.
yeah, yeah.
Is it still working? And again, do you incorporate that a little bit into what
Mm.
you do sort of with the environment and story?
It's like not really used to pump the water anymore because there's a stoomgemaal. I
Is
would.
that what it was for? It was a water pumping,
Yes, yeah.
not
Yeah.
necessarily a grain
No,
run.
not at all. No, just for the
Okay,
water.
that I didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because so we have the canal and then the land often is lower than the canal. So they pump it like up levels in the Netherlands because if they stop pumping, the country will be flooded in, I don't know, very scarily quickly.
Okay.
So now that's all, I don't know, diesel or something, but the old windmills, some of them still exist for heritage thing. And sometimes if it's really bad, they also still use them just on top of. So it turns at least once a week also because they need to do that to keep it in shape. Otherwise the woodworms are going to eat it.
Do the kids find this interesting? Do you bring this into, because this is a real thing about sense of place, right? Where they live, who they are in the Netherlands. So do you incorporate those conversations about the windmill into your explorations with on horseback on the land?
Yeah, sometimes, but again, a windmill for them is such a normal thing that it's like, yeah, the old windmill. We also have one next to our house. We'll so, but some kids you can get more than with others. But I like me as a German, I'm always amazed still at those typical Dutch features, and they look at me like, yeah, what's so exciting about a windmill? So.
Well, it's of course these things are as exciting as one makes them. Like if one makes an exciting story around them, yeah. And when again back to the place we were at in Germany, we often served so much kids from the local international school, many of whom by the age of I don't know 8, they had moved say 3 or 4 times. They might have come from their dad might have gotten some corporate job, in China. And then they had gone from there to Ireland. And then now here they were, or America. And now here they were in Germany. And we often realized that they really didn't kind of know where they were. They were in some sort of bubble of expat land, which was their TV shows, their school, sometimes their expat friends. And I realized, oh, you don't know really what Germany is. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's find out what Germany is then. So I'd make sure that we had German food to eat, and we would sprinkle German into the sessions, and we would talk about why the landscape looks like it does, and who were the Germans, and where did they come from, because they'd actually come in after that particular area was Celtic before the Germans came in. And why did the Germans come in? Because the Romans had been there, and then the Germans came and chased the Romans out because they wanted this, and who had chased the Celts out, and and we found, and then of course you get into fairy tales, because that area that we were in, Hessen, that's where the Brothers Grimm did all their fairy tales. So we found that you could give people a real sense of place, and then of course that translated to people actually from the area themselves who had been born there. But again, as you know, so many kids these days, the experience of the world is through a screen.
Yeah.
So they, just because they're born in the Netherlands and there's a canal and a windmill, doesn't mean that they ever really see the canal or the windmill. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think your excitement about a canal and a windmill would be quite infectious, no?
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess I'm easier excited about animals. So we do that actually quite a lot when we go riding outside. There's like sheep and cows. So we interact with them. Some kids are pretty good impersonators. That's always a challenge who get the sheep to respond if you call out to them in sheep. So yeah, that's probably also what you are excited about, and be able to communicate your excitement.
Exactly. But I always have to challenge myself to get excited about things which I'm maybe not so excited about. You must have this one,
Oh, yeah, I'm a
so many of the kids are like into Minecraft. It's like, I'm not into Minecraft. It's like, I will never be into Minecraft, but I have to pretend to be, and I have to find aspects of Minecraft to get excited about. so that I can have conversations about Minecraft, because that's where the kid is at, right? How do you deal with that? Like Marvel characters, computer games, all of that stuff. How do you use those interests of the kids?
Yeah, so when I get a new kid, we have an intake and I ask about their interests.
Mm.
And then sometimes interests that the parents say are not even the interests that come back in the sessions. But often they do. And then, yeah, kind of depending on the cognitive level, ask the kids about it. Like, how was Formula One yesterday? Or like, we played a Formula One car. Or I had a boy who was he was in his 20s, super interested in mapping wars. I didn't know that was a thing. So there's a whole YouTube channels where they map wars. So you can every day you see how the map changes depending on the development.
Of wars that are going on right now or
Oh,
historic?
everything. So he had done a Second World War day by day in the Middle East or something like that. Crazy several year project. And then that's the way to get them talking, because he actually rather wrote in silence. But yeah, man, once you started asking about that, he couldn't like help himself and got very excited.
And what did you like? For me, actually, honestly, the nerd in me is immediately really
Yeah.
excited by that, right? I would find that totally interesting.
Yes.
But how did you, if that's not your area of excitement, how did you find your way into that excitement so that you could, help bring him out? How did you, if not fake, cultivate, let's say, enough excitement yourself around
I'm a
that?
curious person, so that's good as a starting point.
Mm,
And as you say, if someone else is enthusiastic about it, it's kind of easy to get drawn into.
yeah.
But yeah, you can of course also do research. Like before the next session, I made sure to watch some of the videos and learn a little bit about it, so that I had some questions prepared in case I needed them.
Well, okay, let's talk about that because you make that sound like, oh, of course, I just, watched some videos. I would posit that your average equine assisted practitioner actually does not go and research the interests of the person that they're going to serve. And this is actually one of it's not a pet peeve, it's just a limitation that I observe frequently in the mindsets of equestrian minded people, is that we ourselves, we're so horse focused. We find the horse so fascinating. We're
No space in our
flabbergasted.
brain for anything
Right.
else. Yeah.
Other people find them boring. But then we don't often transfer that to other things. And when I'm doing, say, horseboy trainings with young people who are maybe going into the equine assisted field, and I'll say, what's the story? What's the mythology? What's that tree over there of this place that we're doing the training in? And frequently I'll get a feedback saying, well, I'm not really interested in that. And then I'll say, okay, well, get interested. Because if you can't keep up a running commentary of interesting stories around the place that you're in, how are you going to involve somebody in the place? And also, if you're asking a person to make a change, like become verbal or accept numbers or reduce your anxiety, I mean, that's a huge thing. What are you, the practitioner, doing to challenge yourself to make changes all the time? What language are you learning?
Yeah.
What, or are you coming from this point of view of saying, I don't need to change. I'm the practitioner. You're the client. You need to change. And then you got no tools
Yeah,
to,
in therapy world, there's the concept of the wounded healer. I'm sure you know.
yeah, go on about that.
But that's kind of the same idea, right? So if you have gone through some thing yourself, some trauma, or you have wounds, yeah, then it is easier to relate, I guess, to someone else who does that. And if you healed, you can, yeah, it's easier to relate to someone else having to heal and all the shit they will have to go through to get there.
Do you, as a matter of course, research the interests of the kids that come?
Yeah, yeah,
Do you
definitely.
find that you have a certain amount of people who help you on your team?
Mhm.
Do they do that too? Or do they do it because tell them to do it, or do they do it naturally?
Yeah, but they're learning, so that's also a thing to develop. And some people are more natural at this than others.
But do you find it's something that you need to actually emphasize when you're training people into your program?
Yeah. So often, like, if you have new people, there's like, do you have tips for me? Like, we're doing the session, well, what should I do? And I think my first tip is always like, to start, just hang back and then try to relate to the client, like what they're doing. So example, autistic boy is coming in and sees this new person and is nervous about it. So he goes and picks flowers, looks at the flowers. Then just go and also pick flowers, and maybe you get slowly closer to him and point out this particularly nice flower you found. And before you know it, you have kind of a way in with the kid, rather than standing there and waiting for them to come shake your hand, which is not going to happen.
Or plonking them on a horse.
Yeah.
At the start of the session, and I like that you said your sessions are generally about an hour and a half. I find that the concept of the hour-long session, unless you already have, I mean, if you have a lot of good relationship already with that person, you can do something in an hour. But often, it takes people quite a long time just to reintegrate into the new environment, even if they come quite regularly.
Yeah, I find like half an hour to just arrive. And of course, you might do stuff already, but after half an hour or so, usually I'm like, okay, now you really are here, and we can start doing.
I agree.
Real work.
Back to your own helpers when you're training them. This curiosity piece of the research, I just want to stay on that for a couple more minutes, because I do think it's not looked at enough. Do you actually explicitly tell people, look, this kid's interested in this thing, go on YouTube, go on Wikipedia, and find out some things about this thing so that you can talk to this kid about this thing? Do you kind of guide them that?
Yeah, sometimes, depending on the kid, because I also have quite some kids who really come because they're interested in the horses. So then it's easy, of course, for the helpers. But sometimes, and especially the boys, usually, in my experience, the girls who mainly come here because of the horses.
Yeah.
And then the boys come because their parents are hopelessly overloaded and tried everything and nothing works. And then they thought, let's try this horse thing. And the horse is not the first thing that the boy cares about, but if they stay, they usually also end up liking the horse part.
It's hard not
Even
to.
if the horse has to be a Formula One car. Yeah.
Exactly. Have you seen some boys actually sort of transform a little bit into horsemen through your program?
Good question. I haven't had boys that stayed that long term. Like, I have girls that I've been working with like for 10 years now.
Yeah.
So the boys on average stop earlier.
I have a theory about why that is, but I want to see if you agree with it. I think that this isn't just in the equine assisted world, I think this is in riding in general. It's presented in the wrong way to boys. It's usually presented in a very feminine based way. And what I mean by that is the feminine mind, when it comes to riding, seems to accept quite well from the get-go a certain very structured approach and a certain attention to detail. So the idea of sort of lessons can be accepted quite early. And I feel that with boys, I have to do a different approach, because I've had a lot of boys stay in my program. But what I do is I give them, just like you're talking about with the Formula One, experiences on horseback, which are fun, but require no knowledge of or even control of the horse. But we're doing something, we're going to hit that thing or hit that person from the horse or whatever.
Yeah, that totally fits my experience. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
boys, I have to put more effort into entertaining them.
Exactly. But then if one does, then to get them to stick with the horses, I find there's got to be a big adrenaline component. In general, obviously there's boys who don't fit that, but So where I was lucky, you know, I grew up in this hunting, jumping, cross country, amateur racing culture in the east of England, which it's really high adrenaline. So a lot of boys stay with it. And you look at cowboying, which is also kind of really interesting, multifaceted. Boys tend to stay in that. Down here in Spain, I'd say the majority of the local boys in this area ride because it's doma vaquera. They're working the cows. They go hunting.
Yeah.
It's not just riding in a ring, you know, and learning how to do a shoulder in. But then what I find is that when they've had their adrenaline fix enough, then they kind of want to learn how to do it better. And then that's when you can say to them, sort of somewhere around mid-adolescence, well, all that stuff, that boring stuff those girls have been doing since they were 7 years old, that actually is going to improve your game.
Yeah.
And at that point, they're like, oh, okay. But it's really difficult within the sort of modern riding thing. And then if you add to that the peer pressure that boys go under when they're at school to not ride,
Yeah.
because it's a girl thing.
It's
And
so
yeah,
something that we are on this bike path, right? So our outdoor arena is right at this bike path that lots of locals take to school. And almost every day there's teenage boys who have to shout something to the horses, like horse riding is not sport, something about the horses being eaten.
oh really?
There
That's
must be such a fascination from the horses that they feel drawn to do this every time. Even if we don't react, I mean, they don't get anything out of it as far as I see. But they just, yeah, there's always boys who have to do that. Much
I
more than
wonder if that
girls.
means that deep down they actually want it.
Yeah, that's my theory. But obviously they would probably disagree if I say that.
No doubt. But I just remember myself at school, like all the negative peer pressure I got because I was riding. Oh, you're a girl, you're gay, you're this, you're that. And I had to withstand all of that,
Yeah.
including physical fights sometimes around it. And then I would find myself in a largely female world, which in late childhood, early adolescence
Oh,
is not much fun.
yeah, you're right.
And deal with the exclusivity of, you know, cliquish adolescent girls also giving me a lot of negative feedback for being the only boy. And I had to withstand both of those things in order to just do the thing that I loved. And if I hadn't been really motivated like I was, I don't think I would have stuck with it. The peer pressure would have been too much. And also the negative pressure from the girls not wanting to see boys.
So something about role models?
I think so. So again, this is something I think can be really good with somebody like you, is one of the things I'm very grateful to having grown up male is that I had all these really strong female role models growing up because I did grow up around horses. Therefore, there were all these strong female leaders because that's, as we know, the horsey ladies have that leadership thing. That meant that later in life, when I was coming into the professional world, having women bosses, having women colleagues, it was never a thing for me at all. I was just like, well, of course, because I've just been surrounded by, I will take absolutely orders from a woman because she knows what she's doing. Yeah, of course you're going to do that. Whereas I saw other men struggle with that. And at the same time, I was lucky I had some good male role models, yeah, in that world who could, you know, give me a bit of backup and reassurance when I was feeling bad from either the rejection of the girl clique or the rejection of the boy clique. But we don't make it interesting for boys, you know. So one of the things I find works really well is doing the medieval games. Have them work the lance, have them work the sword, have a quintain you can joust at, that sort of thing. Have something you can whack. These types of things, then they can go back to their male friends and say, I hit people on horseback with this thing.
Yeah.
Then suddenly it's cool. But I do think that there is a deep-seated actually longing for horses within boys.
I saw a book, it was on Facebook, so I would have to double check, but a book about horse genetics that just came out, and I don't remember the name.
Okay.
Like 1,000 years of something, and they argued, according to the Facebook post, so careful, that there was some genetic selection also in horses and human co-evolvement. I'm not sure exactly how they stated it, but basically, so they said there is a genetic component, like that there are some people who just are really drawn to horses.
I'm looking at that right now. Genetic component for what? Horse people?
Yeah, that some people are just
Have a look.
more into horses, but should have written it down.
It's all there in the genes. Horses, traits, and heritability. People and horses have. Ooh. Hold on. Well, maybe I should put book. You said it was a book.
Yeah, it was a book about the genetics of horses in general. So apparently
Genetics
there
of
was
horses.
some mutation that
Yes.
led to the domestication or was related to the domestication of horses.
I've got this thing. I'm Googling, of course. And thehorse.com. What a great name for a website. Why didn't I think of that? It's all in the genes, horse traits and heritability. Let's just have a quick look at this. But scientists are continuing to uncover which genes are responsible for certain traits in horses. Okay. Why are you drawn to a horse? A flashy coat color, a puppy dog personality, smooth as molasses gait. Well, your dream horse didn't come by these traits by happenstance. Blah, blah, blah. But this is more about what makes different horses
Yeah.
in their genetic. I'm just intrigued by that because I think your point about the boys shouting insults as they go by means that they're noticing the horse and they feel that they have to
Yeah.
react and respond in the same way that, boys might do that to girls, and shout something which means that they're attracted to the girls because
Yeah.
otherwise they wouldn't feel some desire to
Exactly.
say something, even if it's not a helpful thing. But I sort of agree with you that we've got a heritage of what 4,000 years minimum of domestication. But before that, we hunted horses a lot. So we must have had a real draw. Like if you go to the cave paintings, those 30,000-year-old cave paintings in southern France, like Chauvet and Lascaux, or in northern Spain, Altamira, and those other ones, there's a real preponderance of horses painted on the wall, and these people were hunting them. But they also seem to have used them very much in kind of magic and ritual, because they seem to there's a lot of transference of horse to human and that sort of thing in that shamanic way. So if horses were like something that we really relied upon for hunting, perhaps because they were large, perhaps because they could feed a lot, but okay, wild cows, bison, yes, but maybe bison are more dangerous to hunt. I don't know. But clearly we've been drawn to them an awful long time, long before we started riding them. And so that there must have been people who then became like the horse hunters or the horse shaman. And then you add then the riding cultures coming in, thousands of people, millions of people sweeping across the steppes from the Yamnaya to the early Bronze Age to getting up to the Huns and the Goths and you look a bit Goth to me. You're from that area in Eastern Germany. I've for sure got some of that Goth blood in me. How could we not? And of course, the Netherlands, as you know, up until very recently, was a very widespread equestrian culture, just in terms of agriculture as well. Those kids who are cycling by surely carry a genetic. Yeah. It makes me wonder what one could do to harness that, like even if it's just a conversation between you and the client who's working with the horse as that boy goes by. Do you talk to your clients and say, why do you think that boy feels the need to react and respond to the horse? Do you think he's secretly longing for the horse? Like, do you have that kind of conversation?
Yeah, we certainly do. Yeah. So that indeed that was a conclusion that also came out of those discussions. Like, yeah, they probably secretly they want to actually be in here with us.
Because that's such a portal to looking at human behavior and
Mhm.
ambiguity and ambivalence and how people say one thing and mean another. And
Yeah.
do those conversations then go from that point?
There's so many of them. Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes it goes directly to the annoying big brother or so,
There is that.
which opens other like things that you can talk about. Yeah.
Genetic component for horse people test results. Now I'm getting a bit.
I'll look up the book. I'll send you the name once I find it.
Yeah.
Because I always think like as long as I can think I loved horses, even though I'm totally not from a horse family, like what is this thing? And I live on my farm with my own horses, and I go on vacation, and the first thing I do is look, where are there horses that I can look at? I mean, how crazy is that? So what makes that urge so big? Yeah.
Your husband is not a horse person particularly, right?
Yeah, weird, right?
But he's a brain person. I know that we're going to have him hopefully on the Live Free, Ride Free podcast. What does he make of your horse obsessed brain?
Yes, very interesting. So I think he was the first one who really took it serious. I remember one of our first dates, we were sitting in a cafe and I was kind of rambling off about the horse I was working with at the moment. And he just looked at me fascinated and he's like, wow, your eyes are sparkling. You are shining when you talk about this horse. Wow, you really love horses. And I thought like, wow, no, like everyone always says was like, yeah, she's talking about her horses again, blah. And he just took it serious. So that was really cool.
Okay, note to all blokes out there on
Take it
dates with
serious.
horsey girls. React positively.
Yeah.
What does he make of it now? That because he's had to make big lifestyle changes and move out to the country.
Yeah. He lives on a farm
Yeah.
for this. Yeah. I always secretly was kind of hoping that the virus would like kick in on him, which hasn't, which I totally can't understand. I mean, he's fine now with caring for them and moving them, and secretly he apparently also talks to them when I'm not there, I heard.
I bet he does.
But he just doesn't have the drive to really do something with them. But I think he's happy that I have that as a passion. And he's a runner, so for him running is his big passion. So it's good if you both have your own thing, because otherwise I think you get in this situation that the one gets jealous of the hobby. Well, a bit grown hobby in my case. Of the other.
I don't think we can say it's a hobby. I think we can say it's a culture.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting, and I bet your horses actually do their own diplomatic charm offensive on him when you're not looking, because it's interesting. He must find it also to some degree peaceful and fulfilling to live this life on this farm and find his own place within it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That in itself is probably worth picking apart at some later date in terms of its therapeutic aspects, in terms of the pressures he might be under at work and that sort of thing. Maybe I'll talk to him about this when we do the podcast. All right. Finally, he's a good segue actually into your other world. So you are still teaching at the university and you teach AI, or at least you teach about AI. But as you said to me before we hit record on this, you help actually students who are studying AI learn to actually old school styly, dinosaur styly, actually research so that they don't end up falling into the obvious, traps and rabbit holes that AI can do. And we know that AI makes things up. My dad did a really funny experiment. My dad's Zimbabwean, and the main tribe in Zimbabwe is the Shona. And so he challenged AI to ChatGPT to give him an essay on the influence of Chaucer, the 14th century English writer Geoffrey Chaucer, who wrote the Canterbury Tales, on a medieval literature. And it gave him this whole thing. Well, there wasn't any Mashona literature influenced by Chaucer, that's for sure. And it didn't matter, ChatGPT produced him a whole thesis.
Yep.
So how do you find that your horse practice and your equine assisted practice and this academic helping people to still uncover as close to the truth as they can, in research, there's an interplay there? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, that's funny. Like often people hear that I'm doing those two things and they're like, oh, that's so different. I'm like, yeah, but it's not really that different because in both cases I teach people and I kind of have to figure out what they know and what they are interested in and take them from there. And of course the content you're teaching is largely different. But the process of kind of tuning in on the learner and then helping them grow is actually really similar.
Right. I would also posit, surely, that when you are working with horses professionally, you have to continually develop yourself, right? Like you said earlier, okay, at an earlier point in your life, you'd have rejected my whole dressage thing. But then you get to a certain point where you realize, well, I'm actually a bit limited with my horses. I must now look for other things. Maybe Rupert's dressage thing is actually worth looking at alongside, 20 other things. I must keep expanding my practice. I must keep expanding my. Did you notice an interplay yourself between cultivating that kind of curiosity and research, having to help people do that, and keeping your own equine assisted practice growing and not stagnating, rather than just saying, okay, I do my horse thing over here and I do it like this and that's how I do it and I just die on that hill. But over here, I'm like the big curiosity person. You know what I mean?
So again, I am just a very curious person.
Yeah.
And that works for with the clients, but that also works for like with the horses. Sometimes I find a bit annoying of myself. Like whenever I learn something, my first thought is like, okay, what else can you do with it or so? So I'm very bad at sticking to a system and just doing that. I always want to know more and secretly think I can do better. So that helped definitely. And I guess that is also what you need in science to be curious and see, okay, what else is there? Because we know a lot, but there's a lot more that we don't know. So how can we get there?
Do you have any of your academic students come out to the farm and work with the horses at all? And if so, yeah, how and why?
Oh, that's been a while. At the start, yeah. Then it was more like colleagues. I guess when you're younger, people are more into experimenting with hobbies or so. So
What was motivating the colleagues to come out and check out your equine assisted practice? They were coming as clients, or they were coming just to kind of hang with a horse and see what's this horse thing that Katja does?
yeah, both. I would say, yeah. But also just like to get lessons, for example.
Okay.
Yeah. And now I'm actually teaching the kids of my colleagues more.
Okay. Well, there you go. I'm just thinking in terms of the students. Have you met Amanda Minervini, Dr. Amanda Minervini?
Yeah.
She lives in Colorado. She's obviously Italian. And I work with her periodically. She teaches at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and she has an equine assisted practice that's really there to help address anxiety in the students. And she started this, it's called Eagle, but it's spelt a different acronym, but I'll try to include it in the show notes, or I'll get her on the show. She has found it's been quite an invaluable thing, and she gets people to come out to the farm and helps with anxiety there, but she also brings horses onto campus. I'm just wondering if that's a sort of I'm planting that seed in you.
Yeah, it's interesting because right now I would kind of almost see it a bit of a conflict of interest to kind of use my university connections to get clients for my farm. Not that I need clients, but
well, you could do it pro bono. You could do it.
You could do that.
Pro bono service, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm gonna stop working for the university because the farm is just outgrowing me otherwise.
Okay.
And I guess then it's not a conflict of interest anymore to.
Well, because that just seems to me such a logical thing to do, because I think that new intake of students post-COVID who were like high school or middle schoolers while COVID was going on, who were the most impacted by COVID, seem to have brought a fragility, you know.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine that your farm would not help with that.
Yeah, we are seeing. So I'm responsible for the first year students at our program, university program, and we see a lot of mental challenges and mental health issues. Yeah, that really has increased over the years. Also challenges in kind of work ethic, kind of. Yeah, why should I go to lectures if I can study it at home with my own video? Which of course then you don't do because that's how we are as humans. So yeah, the first year students need way more help with things outside of the actual content of the program we are finding than they used to. Yeah.
Be curious to see how you develop that. I have a feeling that you will. Yeah, always curious in what Katja Mehlhorn is up to. So
Yeah, me too.
yeah. All right. Well, this has been a really great conversation. I've really enjoyed. I think the theme that seems to run through this for me is curiosity, and the importance of staying curious on a really active and deliberate level. Like Haley, just the fact that you said, I think if there's one real good takeaway from this conversation for someone in this field is, get on YouTube and Wikipedia and go and research the interests of your client, especially if you find that actually a bit boring, because that's kind of our job. And you would think that would be obvious, but it is actually a bit counterintuitive. I love the fact that you brought this to our attention. Before we wrap up, the first thing is, how do people find you? I'm sure people will be seeking mentorship from you. And can they do that? And then the second thing is just, what's next? Where do you want the program to go?
Yeah, so people can find me on my website, which is just my name, katjamehlhorn.nl.
Okay, .nl. Katja with a J, Katja, and Mehlhorn, Mehlhorn.
Mehlhorn. Yes.
MEH.
MEHL?
MEHL.
HORN.
HORN. MEHLHORN.
Yes.
Okay, 2 H's in there. All right.
Yeah.
.nl.
Yes.
Okay. Katjamehlhorn.nl. If people want to come check your program out, email you, ask you questions, get training from you, get mentorship from you, can they contact you there?
Certainly, yeah. Yeah.
I would recommend it, listeners. Katja runs a really, really, really good program. You want to pick her brain. And then just before we go, dream a little. Where do you want to go with this, and where do you want to see the equine assisted world go?
Oh yeah, two good questions. So the first one, that's really on my mind right now. Like, where do I want to go with this? Given that I'm gonna quit my well-paying fixed university job, which is kind of scary.
Be mad.
Yeah, I know. It took me 10 years to bring up the courage. So it feels really relieving now that I took this choice. So what I really would like to work here with a team of more people, because now I just work with volunteers and I just get so much energy from working with others. And also with clients, you see that one client clicks better with the other person. And you can really, like, working together, you just get more out of it, I think, for the client and for yourself. Some direction we've been thinking is to work with people who can't go to high school or to school. So there's a lot in the Netherlands. I don't know how that's in other countries.
School refusers,
Yeah, school refusers or at risk of, or they only go an hour per day. And yeah, ideally you want to improve the schools, that you don't need places like this where they can come to. So we're working on that with Henrich in a parallel thing.
Okay, so listeners, that's Henrik Berkhoff, who was on Live Free, Ride Free, but Katja and Henrik and Gitti run an amazing horseboy and other general therapeutic farm in central Germany, and they, with Katja, have got a cross-border interesting project going on.
Not just with me, other Dutch horseboy practitioners,
Yeah, so we'll be reporting on that.
I'm curious how that works.
And that's about actually improving the schools?
Yes.
In what way? Like how?
well, making them so that we don't have all those kids have to drop out.
Indeed, but I mean,
Yeah.
what's sort of in the plan that you've got to help that happen? What are you drafting up?
So the idea is to get the movement method principles more in there. So as we already said earlier, movement, nature, following more the interest of the child so that they can actually see the purpose of numbers other than that the teacher tries to torture them. And there's a lot of those kind of things already going on in schools at some level, I have the feeling. But it seems to stay kind of, this teacher at this school is trying that, and then there's this program over here. But yeah, it would be great to have it much more on a larger scale.
Movement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'd be very grateful to you if you can, not if you can, as you, knowing you and Henrik, you're going to get it going. Yeah. I'll be extremely grateful. And then we'll have you back on the show, I think, to talk about how that's going. The equine assisted world in general, where would you like to see it go? How would you like to see it develop?
Yeah, there's so much right now also about equine welfare. In the Netherlands, there's this big discussion like, are horses, or should we even still ride horses? There's like some politicians who think we shouldn't. And I think that would be such a shame because, I mean, we already touched on this a couple of times in this conversation that there's just this spark, this magic, this something between humans and horses that we can use for our welfare and our sanity in this crazy digital, busy, stressful world. So hopefully we move towards more equine welfare and also towards more human welfare by pairing them up.
Yeah, it seems to me that this idea of public license and, should we be doing it? Although it's good that we should always examine, what we do. At the same time, there's something in it that saddens me because it seems to me about just yet another removal from nature. Horses are nature. Our interaction with them is nature. Okay.
Yeah, and it would be such a shame because I mean the people that give it a bad image that treat the horses as the sports tools for the money and that maybe reject don't take welfare as important as it could be, they then damage it for everyone. I mean, there's all those people who are trying to really do it in a way that is nice for the horse and that the horse can do it.
I agree. I think it's a necessary conversation, but I hope that it doesn't swing to an extreme that ends up harming both horses and humans, because horses are a domestic species. And, the next thing we'll say, well, should we own dogs?
Yeah.
And, and then
kids, how about that?
And if the answer to that is also no and all of that, then what interactions with nature are we allowed to have, particularly for urban populations?
And I mean, just going back to the example with the apples, if you don't know what a natural apple looks like, you won't care about the apples. So if you never interact with an animal, you won't care for them or protect them. So yeah, you have to.
I wonder if you were talking about this lady in Virginia, Brook Hill Farm, and I actually work in a very similar place in Chicago quite often called Triple H Ranch. Really good place where they do exactly the same thing. They take rescue horses, and my God, are some of these horses in a bad way when they come in. Like, I hadn't seen horses that emaciated since I used to live in India for a while, and I saw horses that were living on the street and that sort of thing, terrible conditions. You'd think in America it's quite difficult to get a horse in that condition because there's like grass growing everywhere. You've actually got to try quite hard. So if you don't like the horse, you can always just open the gate and let it out, and it'll find grazing somewhere, and someone will pick it up, right? In the same way that people dump dogs, people do dump horses that way. So to get a horse to that level of starvation is like, how? But nonetheless, I saw horses coming in like that, and then saw her rehab them, and her client base being the rehabbers, exactly as you said. Maybe we need to somehow have more of an emphasis on this in our equine assisted programs. And I'm hoping we're doing a lot of outreach at the moment to the sport world. Ireland is a really good mover and shaker in this. Horse Sport Ireland, which governs everything from racing to show jumping to equine assisted, realized quite recently that it's really the only sector of the horse industry that's growing. Equine assisted
Really?
world, yeah. And we are the only ones who actually can really make a point of rehabbing and rescue. And we, of course, take over the wastage from the sport world.
Yeah.
But the sport world doesn't have to operate in a way that wastes horses. That's just something that's evolved
Yeah.
because of a poor economic model. You know, could we, the equine assisted practitioners, be the ones leading the way to better practices at the beginning of the sport process so that horses get injured less, have more training in them to look after their balance and their bodies emotionally, and then also when they move on from the sport career to then move more seamlessly into the next career. I do believe that's possible, and I do believe that we're the ones with the technology for that,
Yeah.
So maybe we should be seeing a bit of that at your farm too. See who from the racing industry, who from the dressage industry, who from the jumping industry can we pair up with and partner up with, whether it's aftercare,
Yeah.
pre-care. Yeah.
I think a good point you're touching there also is visibility. Like what I said, like now people, at least in the Netherlands, they see like the examples of the dressage horses with the blue tongue and the blood on their mouth. While all this, I mean, all of us who work in equine assisted, we know that cool stuff that's happening. So I think that needs to be more visible. And yeah, who is better than the people who already love horses and do sport with them to get it visible too, and get involved.
I agree.
Yeah.
I also feel that most sport horses honestly would love to have a double career, a parallel career, doing the equine assisted stuff, because that's what my horses do. Like, as you know, my horses, they're dressage horses, they're jumping horses, they trail horses, they do it all, but they also do the therapy work, and they're just like humans. They love to have variety in their work, and they like to do more than one thing. It would be very interesting to see, could we find some Dutch high-level rider who's willing to bring their multi-million-dollar horse into the therapy thing as a bit of a flagship, you know what I mean? That might be an interesting
Things
project.
like that.
Like, can we identify that individual?
Yeah.
I think I just set myself a challenge there.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that's what we're going to do next year. All right, fine.
Cool.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Katja, for all of this
Thank you.
and for the work you do. And I guess we'll see you soon over on Live Free, Ride Free to talk about AI and the brain.
All right.
All right, then. Until next time.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. If you like what we're doing here, please do like, subscribe, tell a friend. It so helps us to get this valuable work done and the message of equine assisted stuff out there. And if you're interested in more conversations, you might want to check out our Live Free, Ride Free podcast. And if you'd like to support the podcasts, please go to rupertisaacson.com and click on the Patreon link. If you're a professional in the equine assisted field or are considering a career in the equine assisted field, you might want to check out our 3 certification programs: Horseboy Method, Movement Method, and Taquine Equine Integration. You can find all of those over on newtrailslearning.com. And finally, if you want to check out our cool rock and roll themed merch, back on rupertisaacson.com, please click on shop. You'll find all kinds of fun goodies there. And if you're looking for a way to spend time until the next podcast, you might want to consider reading the books that kicked all this off: The Horseboy, The Long Ride Home, and The Healing Land. So see you next time on Equine Assisted World. Join us for the adventure.